want money. You give them money, and that's what our development banks have been doing. They give them money to support them, to help them. And then they worry about how they're going to recoup. So, but they're coming under constant attack for this. Not because of their lending, but because they've got preferred creditor status. And therefore, they have to be paid first. So, Dr. Ilombi, can you tell us why this issue has yet again raised its head and is making headlines in all the financial papers?
Thank you. Thanks very much. I think the issue is arising. It's not a question of it arising. It's always been there. I get the sense that it's always been there and for quite some time, but perhaps it wasn't seen as significant because there were only certain players in the arena, as my brother here says. There were only certain players in the arena. Then you have, in the case of Africa, you then have to say, why now? So it's only arising, it's gaining a certain momentum at this particular time. So why now? The answer is straightforward. For the 2 minutes you give to me, simply, it is that a small number of African multilaterals have, with the support of their governments, emerged, and they are making a statement, taking their space, and becoming extremely significant. And so, perhaps for the same kind of reasons that Professor Kishore Mubabani referred to a little earlier in his discussion this morning, perhaps for reasons similar to those, this is creating anxieties in the traditionally established multilaterals. It's also creating anxieties amongst the large private sector lenders, the so-called Paris Club, and that's what's generating it right now. If you take together the African small multilaterals as you think we are, but we've become very strong and relevant, the interventions we do have become more relevant. The states pay more attention to us. For that reason, they take a different view to the liabilities that they owe to the Afreximbank and the other African small multilaterals. They do pay their loans. The others get worried. That's why it is happening. It's only just starting because of the increasing relevance of our institutions.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Ilombi. So, yes. What you're saying, to oversimplify it, is that we Africans are now muscling in on territory that's to be held by others.
That's right.
You know, they were always coming around to save Africa. Now, Africans are saving themselves and doing a much better job.
Precisely.
And therefore, it's causing a few headaches here and there. They say, wait a minute, no, you don't qualify.
It's the syndrome of the threat, the same threat Professor Kishore was referring to in the morning.
Exactly.
And so the fight is these are the last kicks of a dying giant, if you like.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Ilombi. Doctor.
Thank you, George Ilombi, that's right.
And I'll now turn to Dr. Misheck Mutize, African Peer Review Mechanism. To follow on from what Professor Dr. Ilombi just said, the criticism that is being levied today, we are being told that the same rules should apply to the Bretton Woods institutions, the World Bank, the IMF, as they should apply to the African Development Bank, to Trade Development Bank, and other regional banks. Now, in your opinion, is this a fair criticism?
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Please, ladies and gentlemen, please, let's listen to.
I hope I'm audible enough. Yes, and thank you for. I think it's a very critical subject that we have to advance a little bit further. To start with, aligning with what Dr. Ilombi has just mentioned, I think it's double standards to want to for the Bretton Woods to want to monopolize the practice of preferred creditor status. In the sense that if you look at the basis of criticism for removing the preferred creditor status, which I don't think is practical given that these institutions are found by member states that they are operating within. They claim that these institutions are lending into risky projects. So in other words, it doesn't justify the preferred creditor status. But the lending is also driven by the need, which then fulfills or make these institutions fulfill the purpose for which they are being established for. So it's impossible for these institutions for their preferred creditor status to be removed, because legally the member states that found the institutions have a legal mandate to support the operating environment for these institutions, as well as the assets to allow them to perform this function. And I actually think that the strategy in the international financial circle to attack this component of preferred creditor status might be deliberate. I say that on the basis of the work that we do in the African Union on credit ratings. If you look at consistently the reports that are issued by international rating agencies, they consistently mention the issue of preferred creditor status, that their assumptions are on the basis that these institutions, the MFI, they continue to enjoy the preferred creditor status. So they always remind that they are sitting on the cliff, that if IMF, the Paris Club, at some point stop recognizing the preferred creditor status of African multilateral financial institutions, then there is going to be a rapid downgrade. And the market is always keeping this at the back of their mind, and also investors who bring money to Africa through these institutions. And I'm saying that it's important for us to note that when there is discomfort in the capital that comes through these institutions to Africa, it also comes at a cost. And that cost is a benefit to the investors that are sitting outside, and they want to justify why Africa has to be charged a higher interest. So it's important, I think, to consistently remind the market that preferred creditor status is inherent in the establishment of these institutions. And there is no point that will come where this status has to be lifted by virtue of the establishment and the purpose of these institutions.
Thank you very much. We're now coming to the first of our sovereign perspective, because sovereigns, represent countries, represent nation status, and they're different from multilateral organizations. And first I will turn to Mr. Muhammad Abdullahi, who is the Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. In your opinion, if this status is somehow or the other removed, how would it compromise the African multinational financial institutions? One, I would also like you to please tell us something about resilience. How do we build resilience at a dangerous time in world economics?
Well, thank you very much, Moderator. It's an honor really to be on this distinguished panel. And I believe that what we're discussing today is not only timely, but also existential. As we know, across the continent today, we're dealing with a lot of global headwinds, fragile debt dynamics, persistent development gaps. And the question before us continues to be how to build institutions that can not only withstand shocks, but also bring about long-term prosperity. For us in Nigeria, as we heard yesterday and through the course of the conference, Afrexim has been a very important partner in our development journey. Over $52 billion has been accessed by Nigeria to finance various development projects. But we know very clearly that Africa's development is not just about money, but it's also about the right type of financing which institutions like Afrexim are providing. And this is, when it's delivered through the right institutions and supporting the right reforms, can bring around the development priorities that we so dearly require. And so within the context of this, the preferred creditor status is actually underpins what makes this ecosystem work. So we believe very strongly that preserving this for African-led institutions like Afreximbank is not just a matter of privilege, but a matter of necessity, as it is a mechanism that can ensure that these institutions can continue to mobilize long-term, affordable capital at scale that can continue to bring around development for our governments and our institutions. For us in Nigeria, in terms of building resilient institutions, over the last 18 to 20 months, particularly within the Central Bank of Nigeria, we've tried to focus on macroeconomic stability, building a strong financial system, and governance is rooted in coordination and transparency. And if I go a little bit into particularly building the importance of building a strong and scalable domestic banking system, Nigeria has embarked on a banking sector recapitalization, which aims to focus on really supporting its aspirations towards building a trillion-dollar economy. Now, this really has seen commercial banks raising significant amount of funds, and this is important not only because of the aesthetics of it, but we believe that well-capitalized domestic banks are essential partners to multilateral lenders like Afreximbank, and they co-finance critical infrastructure that would deepen financial intimidation and ensure that these MFI resources are reaching the productive sectors of the economy directly. To weaken preferred creditor status is to weaken our access, as I mentioned, to long-term affordable and stable finance. And we believe very strongly that safeguarding this for multilateral institutions like Afrexim is not just a technical issue, but a development imperative.
Thank you very much. I now come to Mr. Emmanuel Mbawe Tutuba, who's the governor, Bank of Tanzania, and I believe that some very important person has arrived yesterday, which kept you up very late. Yeah. You will tell us who that person was. I would also like to point out that much as it sometimes pains me to say so publicly, but Tanzania is outstripping Kenya economically. People from Kenya do not like to admit this, but they are doing very well. So what do the African multilateral financial institutions mean to you? Are they important to you? And if they are important, would you like to see them remain strong?
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. First of all, I would like to congratulate the Afreximbank for having a wonderful performance throughout the 32 years of operations in the African continent. And based on their mandate, I think for us as Tanzania, we have seen a very good and impressive performance. Of course, based on their mandate, we understand that they were created in order to support the African continent since 1993. And by that moment, up to this time, I think for most of the countries, we have seen that they are still producing what they are not consuming and consume what they are not producing. And for that matter, we see Afreximbank being part of the institutions that will support us to either add value for the sake of enhancing exports or sometimes to trade among ourselves. And since now, during their operations, they have continued to support different countries. For example, in Tanzania, we understand that there are some priorities which cannot be financed by other multilateral institutions, And I remember in 2021-22, when I was working as a permanent secretary for Ministry of Finance in Tanzania, we approached them and we had some projects, especially for construction of the standard gauge railway. It's more than 2,000 kilometers, and we wanted to connect Tanzania. You know, we are a member of EAC. At the same time, we are also a member of the SADC. So our commitment was to connect the SGR to EAC, especially to Uganda, and also to connect it to the northern part and the western part of Tanzania, which goes to Burundi and the DRC. So you can see, having such a big project, when you approach the other multilateral institutions, they say, no, that is not a priority for us. But when you talked to Afreximbank, they saw that it's a priority because it will ease trade facilitation within EAC and SADC. At the same time, you know, that project, since it will also connect it to other regions, and since it also uses green energy from the hydropower, means it qualified to access funds even from green finances. But other institutions, they say, no, you can just hold it. Since it's your priority, there's no way you can chip in. But for Afreximbank, they accepted it to participate, and they provided a lot of resources. So for our case, we see having the preferential creditor status, for them, it gives them a leeway to support other development projects. And for us, since the project started, was a part of our top priority, it means as a country, we'll also continue to honor our commitment and put on a top priority to the extent that at any period of time, we cannot default to that repayment of loans. And based on the semi-concessionality of the loan, we saw that it supported us. So, in general, I can say that for all the African countries, we need to support these multilateral development and the international financial institutions to the extent that should be supported either when they are mobilizing more resources in terms of capital, in terms of contributions, so that they can continue supporting our development agenda. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. In fact, the SGR is it's ultra-modern railway system. And this 10 years, 15 years was unthinkable. You know, there was no way you could get that kind of railway line. Now you're already going to extend it further and further. More, of course, the railway lines extend to different countries, reach different markets, means more trade will develop within African countries. So that is the multilateral finance institutions in action, and we have seen now the effect of that action already on one of the fastest growing countries in Africa. And that if that status, that protection on their laws is removed from them, then perhaps they will lose that ability to carry out the kind of financing that you have seen and benefited from. So now I will turn to Professor Akingube again, because while we agree that we need the preferred creditor status, the outside world keeps on saying, no, you don't deserve it, you are commercial banks, and so on. So I'd like to turn to you, sir. Can you tell us what is the status? Is there a legal status of the preferred creditor status? And is there any organization in the world that can actually remove this status? Please, sir. It's yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Versi. So I think the place to sort of continue the conversation is to indicate quite clearly that African states and Africa's development and the building of its institutions, whether it's credit rating, African multilateral financial institutions, would be impossible if we were to follow the model that created the Western institutions that African states go to today. In particular, the conditions that birthed the existence of the IMF and the World Bank and such institutions no longer exist today. At its best, keynotes here have shown that the West doesn't know what it's grappling with right now. So to insist on the same kind of template to map Africa's trajectory of development, in particular its financial institutions, in the current age, really doesn't make sense, right? So the idea that preferred creditor status is given, number one, on the basis of recognition, I've indicated, the question should be why? Who are those recognizing them? But number two is the source and access to funding. This has been the bane of Africa's development, that we look to the West for virtually everything. Okay, to some global South countries, right? China as well. But these days, but the core question is, our financial institutions won't grow if they don't find the very innovative ways in which they can exist and meet their development goals. And so if you look at the treaty that sets up the Afreximbank, it has a mix, right, of commercial private shareholders, and then its developmental goals. It is a recognition of what Africa needs to grow and the access they will need to financing. So the argument that predicates on the idea that because you're doing certain kinds of commercial lending, you're not doing development work, and therefore you shouldn't have access to preferred credit, misses the mark completely, in my view. Because the reverse is to say, continue to go to the Western institutions, which we now know have flooded us with conditions that makes it so difficult for private citizens to actually live if those fiscal policies were implemented to the letter. So the other part of it, which is the legal aspect which you've asked, is to the extent that this is a treaty that member states have now all signed on to, not a recent occurrence, it's ingrained in it. I don't see anybody taking it away. The corollary I will draw to then end my intervention at this point is, in international law generally, we'll talk about customs that are recognized by states being part of what is the creation of international law. Up to today, the customs that forms the practices of global South countries, Africa, Latin America, some parts of Asia, is never really what is recognized as the core of customs in the international community of states. So we cannot defer, in my view, to that kind of definition. The basis is there in the treaty. Its importance is akin to not just protection of this bank, to their core existence as well, and not just Afreximbank, but also African multilateral financial institutions. So that, in my view, yes, the commercial lending is there, the shareholding part is there, but it is precisely there because of the innovative way those who drafted those treaties have to think about it. And to end, I would say, if you look at the trade regime, which this conference centered yesterday, a lot of the things that are being done there, some have questioned, have borrowed too directly from the West, right? But a lot of it are also innovative and unique to the African context. And I think that's where academics, and I'm glad policymakers, all need to continue to center the effort and be those who lead these arguments rather than defending the arguments.
Thank you very much. One of the other very points of great contention which is happening right now is ratings. Dr. George will elaborate on that. But as you all know, that credit ratings are very important. And how much money you can raise and what interest rate you can raise depends on your credit ratings. The higher your credit ratings, the cheaper it is to borrow. The lower your credit ratings, the more expensive it is to borrow. So if you're a lending association, if you borrow expensive, you will also lend expensive, and people will not be able to afford it. But now, Fitch, which is one of the global credit agencies, has decided to downgrade Afreximbank. So, Dr. Ilombi, you have come across, your bank has come out very robustly but politely and said this is erroneous. Can you explain to us what is going on now with the rating issue?
Well, it's quite a pretty straightforward one, but perhaps I should add one thing to what Professor Akingube was saying here. The treaties that establish our institutions, in some cases explicitly, in some areas implicitly, do give us certain protections. That's what the PCIs are about. So it's fully covered. But in our case, because we are newer institutions, they also go further. They provide certain other things which the older multilaterals do not have. And then they also say, should the member country give a treatment, a better treatment to another institution, then Afreximbank would also have to be given that same treatment. So it's not now possible for anyone to suggest that it gets a treatment which is better than Afrexim's, because if it gets that treatment, then by reason of our treaty, that same better treatment is extended to Afreximbank. So if it is in terms of the treaty, and I go back to the treaty, you will soon see why, we feel comfortable with that. There is no problem with it. Fitch and the rating. It's all based on the possibility that our member states will not honor the treaty. Why wouldn't they honor the treaty? Why would they choose to honor the treaty, the treaties they have with establishing other multilaterals which are non-African, and refuse to honor the multilateral treaties which they signed for themselves for African countries? It is most unlikely. But in our case, it's also peculiar. Preferred creditor treatment or status, some convention developed by the large multilaterals, was something that the states gave to those multilaterals which were essentially almost entirely owned by governments, states, because they were also essentially lending to states. That was normal. Come Afreximbank, the African governments decide, in the context of a particular situation in the evolution of the countries, in the economies, in the 80s and the 90s, the countries decide that the shareholding of Afreximbank would be made up of states, African states, the African private sector, and then non-Africans. And in a certain combination, in a combination in which if you took the African private sector and non-Africans, in terms of the charter, you would have a bank which is 65% controlled, not controlled by states. The African states would have 35%. So what's the message? The message is use private sector money, use private sector shareholders, but do development.
Yeah.
How are you going to use private sector money and face the challenges of development? And so, to help the institution do so, because the states recognize that it would have to do certain things which normal private sector unprotected would not do, they then embedded in the treaty establishing Afreximbank the kind of treatment which they would only give to a public sector multilateral. What's the message? Afreximbank is probably in a better situation than those multilaterals because it can do private, public, just everything, and get that treatment. That's the real problem that we have with Fitch. They have a difficulty understanding that.
Thank you very much. Wonderful.
And so, that's what that rating is all about. Fitch cannot just get to terms with the fact that an African entity would get this kind of treatment while non-African entities would get it. But you know, where it hurts us the most is not that Fitch thinks like that. It is that that line of thinking is not in line with nature, with the normal. It's against conventional wisdom. You protect yourself first. Why would Fitch be worried that African governments seek to protect an African institution which they created and in which they put their money. What else should the governments be doing than protect their own institutions? So that's where the real worry is, that Fitch is unable to adjust his mindset to the fact that charity starts at home. You look after yourself first, then you look after others, especially if your own institutions have become extremely relevant. Unless we were relevant, Fitch and the others would not be worried with us at all. We would be left lying there, which is what they have done. We've been in existence for 30 years, so why now? It's just that we've become extremely relevant, too big to ignore, closer to our governments. We pay more attention to the troubles. We head to the governments when we see a difficulty somewhere. We do not wait to be approached. And we explain to ministers and to central bank governors, this is where we see the problem. And sometimes they say to us, it's even worse than you see, actually. And then you deal with it. And sometimes they say, no, you haven't seen the right problem. It's not there. It's over there. And then we find a solution. This increasing relevance means that they also treat your loans fairly. And sometimes they assist you to get repaid for loans that you do to the private sector, because they give you a treaty protection to lend to the private sector. That's what it is all about. But they're finding it difficult to get to this, to understand this. We just think that with time, they will get used to it. But the rating itself is neither here nor there, as you would have seen. It goes up and down. And this is not the first time Fitch is actually giving Afreximbank a negative rating action. It's done so in the past. It didn't raise much concern because everyone knows it could be rated up today and you rate it slightly lower tomorrow, and the day after, get a significant improvement. It is the very disparaging language which is used, and that is arising from what they believe African governments will do to their own children. It's extraordinary.
Thank you very much. But just to play sort of devil's advocate, because one of the reasons why the Fitch rating, according to them, has downgraded was because of loans that the bank had made to Zambia, Ghana, and South Sudan, which Fitch says are non-performing. But you have countered that argument. But they've used that, and that's, to me, what it means, and I may be wrong here, and I stand corrected, but for me, this is the first time there's a breaking in the ranks. Now, I'm sure we don't want to go down that line, but there's a slight breaking in the ranks because African states have always been behind their development institutions. This is the first time that Ghana says, no, maybe, this is non-concessionary. Zambia says, no, this was non-concessionary loan, which we don't accept. South Sudan did not pay back, but the bank has now come to an agreement with them. Although they went to court in the UK and the bank won, but they've come down and said, okay, you pay us when you can. So
we could also take that point very quickly, so that there is some clarity in it. It's just a difference in methodologies. Fitch has its own methodology, and we had no difficulty with that at all. Afreximbank, like most institutions, applies the international financial standards, and the rule is very clear. The loans could be in difficulty, but they're not impaired. You apply that standard, it gives you a slightly different outcome from Fitch's own methodology. And to that extent, we really had no difficulty with Fitch. We said, just make it clear in your report that you've applied your own methodology, which any professional can look into. You give it to 20 accountants, you probably would get about 3 or 4 different outcomes. So that's all right, and it's honest. We ask them to put it and just state that the methodologies applied, the different results have to do with the different methodologies, and the methodologies are of both recognized internationally. At that rate, I don't think anyone would be extremely extremely worried at that. I think it is the attempt then to go and to claim that those countries, that Afreximbank doesn't have that treatment, and therefore, in their view, the states would not recognize the treaty. But there is a contradiction as you read the Fitch report again more carefully. It says they believe that at some time in the near term, that is 18 months to 2 years, those same obligations will begin to be repaid. So if they are going to be repaid in that near term of 18 to 2 years, there is not much to worry about in terms of the impairment. And so you see why the question of standards. So if they had put it in a professional way, so that every professional looking at it applies his mind to it and forms his own judgment, some would be more critical of Afreximbank, some perhaps would ignore what Fitch is saying, then it's neither here nor there. And that's why we see rating is about, it's like a yo-yo, it goes up, sometime it comes down. But so long as it remains professional, we have no difficulty with that at all. And the credit, and by the way, it's not the first time that we increase the lending to African countries at difficult times.
Thank you very much. We don't have much time left, but
Thank you.
I'd just like to ask Mr. Mohamed Abdullahi, in your opinion, what stance should African countries take? Do you think that the development institutions are under attack? And you, as a sovereign, how would you like to take that on? I would like you, each one of you, 1.5 minutes. After you, we'll come to Tanzania and then to the AU position. Sir.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, and thank you very much for that intervention. I think at this time, many of the economies across Africa are facing limited fiscal buffers, high debt servicing consuming a large part of public resources. Domestic capital markets are still undeveloped. Access to global financial markets are still limited. So this is a period where actually we need to strengthen instruments like the preferred credit status, because we need to bolster as much as possible the ability of African economies to be able to withstand these challenging periods. So I think we're fully in support of of Afreximbank and other similar institutions, and really want to underscore the importance of this and put our whole weight behind it, because Nigeria has found this partnership, the support from Afrexim very useful for us. We believe very strongly that when Nigeria has been able to repay all its obligations to the bank, and we're hoping that other economies as well would benefit from this across infrastructure, social spending, and as much as possible we would like to support the strengthening of the preferred credit status.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abdullahi. Bwana Mpawe Tutuba, tafadhali. What stance do you think African countries should take?
Yeah, thank you very much. For our case, we believe that Afreximbank was created based on the treaties alluded by my colleagues. It is in line with our priorities. And in this regard, since it's part of the multilateral institutions, has continued to implement their mandate. Despite that, based on these turbulences across the globe, because we saw in the recent past, there was a time when these economical shocks came in maybe after like 10 years. But you can see recently they are emerging year after year. If we can take example of the COVID pandemic, which came in 2019, and then in just 2020 and 2021 we had Ukraine and Russia crisis. Immediate after that, then we had another challenges. So you can see there are a number of economic turbulences, but now this is the time when most of our economies, they really need huge support in terms of finance, in terms of funds that will support to remain resilient. But for us, for example, in Tanzania, we have remained resilient for a number of years because our economy has continued to perform, of course, to some extent better. Because I remember before the pandemic, we were growing to the level about 7%, but we went down abruptly to around the 4.7. Now we have started to pick up. Now another challenge has emerged. As of last year, 2024, our GDP grew to the level of 5.5%, but we are now continue to struggle within this situation. So you can see this is the time when we really need more support from different angles. But for the normal multilateral development cooperation institution and the international financial institutions whose are not maybe have a preferential creditor status, they are like hesitating to support some of the development activities, and they are now coming up in with higher interest rates. Now, I would appeal maybe to see the way where most of these multilateral institutions can continue dishing out funds with the confidence that during the repayment they will be considered as one of the top priority, and all the countries now, they need also to take that spirit on board and ensure that during the repayment they cannot even default. We understand there are a number of criteria, but we have seen, for example, for the case of Afreximbank, based on the size of capital, they would have maybe invested in other higher interest bonds.
Higher yield, yes.
Yeah, but still, they are sticking on their core function to support development activities within the region, where they are expecting maybe after some period of time, those countries that have received the support from the bank, they will also boost their economy and they continue to support their countries together with other partner states within the regions. So by doing so, I can see that there is a less risk for other multilateral institutions to join, but for these multilateral institutions who have volunteered to stick on their core functions, they are also continue to live like a landmark and the legacy in our
sorry, I have
African
to
countries.
interrupt you. We are just warming up and now being told time is up.
Yeah.
But one last sentence perhaps to you, sir. African Union.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. I will just circle back to what
You
has
have
been
1
said
minute
before.
to convince
Yes.
this audience.
This issue is not about Afreximbank or Trade and Development Bank or a few African multilateral institutions. It's about an ecosystem that is being developed to finance Africa's development. So if the preferred creditor status of one entity is discredited, it's a strong precedent to discredit the whole ecosystem of financing for Africa. So we continue to reaffirm, because this has been reaffirmed in the African Union, in the Finance Ministers platform of the Specialized Technical Committee, that our member states are always reminded to reaffirm and to uphold the treaties that they've ratified.
Thank you very much. And my sincere thanks to this wonderful audience. I've been watching you. You've been following it with a great deal of interest. And I'm sure it has given you lots to think about. And it would have been wonderful to hear your views. But unfortunately, we can do it. Fortunately, we can do it after the session is finished. So please join me in giving a great appreciation to this wonderful panel who have wrote. So, and with that, I thank you. Session is over. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for such a rich and focused discussion. Another round of applause, please, ladies and gentlemen. I think we leave this panel with one clear takeaway. Institutional strength isn't optional, it's essential. And at this point in the program, it is my pleasure to invite Mojibade Shosanya to the stage to provide us with a quick update on the fundraiser for Africa Life Science. A warm welcome again, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you. Your Excellencies, very distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, please permit me to rest on the already established protocol. Like was introduced, my name is Mojibade Shosanya, and I never shy from admitting that I'm a very proud African. Yesterday, I had the honor of introducing the African Life Sciences Foundation, and today I will be reintroducing that foundation to you, our very distinguished delegates. Now, the African Life Sciences Foundation was established in March this year, 2025. And it presents us with an opportunity to strategically invest in homegrown research and innovation that significantly improves response to Africa-specific diseases and health challenges to cater to the needs of the underprivileged and, of course, the medically vulnerable amongst us. When Africa is healthy, Africa is wealthy. So what are we asking? We are asking for your generous support, and we are appealing to you to please lend us your generous donation